Hello and welcome to Pictorial Planet. My name's John Finch. Today we're starting a new series that I'll be revisiting throughout the year, where I'll be taking an old negative that I haven't printed and seeing if I can get any life out of it. Now, it's true to say that you can't get a good photograph out of a bad negative, and some of the ones we'll look at through the year are not particularly good negatives. But I think there's a lesson in every negative, and today's is going to be about grades and burning in. Which grade do I choose to burn in with and why? So I hope this is a useful video for you. Let's get over and start. Here are the negatives that I'm talking about, and I think you'll see they're pretty peely-wally. And when I say peely-wally, they're low in contrast. They're a bit flat. It was a very flat day. It was overcast with rain. It wasn't a good day, but I saw this spot and I thought that might make a photograph. It might make one. So I took them anyway. I took a set of them here. As you can see later on, the day picked up, but this is a completely different photograph. And I wonder if I can get something out of these. So looking at them with the loupe, I've got some decent cloud detail in the very top of this one, which looks quite good. And there's a little bit more contrast here in this area of the negative. So I think of all of them, this might be the best one to get something out of. This is quite good, but it doesn't have quite the same detail in the foreground. So I'm going to try to print this one, and let's see what we can pull out of it. First of all, let's do a straight print. Here is the straight print. This is a grade 2 straight print, and it does look a little bit flat, so I'm already thinking I'm going to go up a grade. But I wanted to talk about this because you're starting to see the photograph now. I shot down this valley. There's a road that snakes down the valley to this small village at the end here. And there's these nice mountains that disappear into the distance. They look nice. It all looks a little flat, so I'm thinking it's going to have to go up a grade at least. And I'm looking at the sky, and it is pretty much blank. There's nothing really there. We need to pull some more sky out of this. Now, as we look at this print, think about the fact that we can only record 10 stops on this print, but the film records more than 10 stops. The film records pretty much an extra 5 stops above in the higher zones than the paper can actually reproduce. So if we can burn this sky in, we can bring in some of those higher zones that the film recorded and bring them into the printable area of the paper. And as we think about burning in the sky, we need to think about what grade we're going to use to burn the sky in, because it does affect the print differently. Let's just talk for a minute about grades and burning in. Here's how I want to describe the effect of the different grades that we use to burn in. Now, of course, you have grades available from grade 0, 0 right through to grade 5, but I'm going to focus just on these two grades, grade 5 and grade 0, as I talk about burning in, and you can extrapolate this information to the other grades. For instance, grade 1, grade 2 will be nearer this one, and grade 4 will be nearer grade 5, right? The effect of grade 4 will be closer to grade 5. So if I talk about grade 0 and grade 5, we'll get the gist of what's happening with our burning in. So first of all, our photograph has tonality, and it goes from the shadows right up to the highlights. And I've given you these here. It's not, shadows aren't in zone 0, but you get my gist. This is the darkest areas, and these are the lightest areas of your photograph. And there's all of these shades all the way through the photograph on the paper. As I said, film has much greater latitude than paper and continues up to about zone 15 or zone 16. That's how much light the film can actually capture. But our paper is restricted to this area here, so let's focus on this. So we have our photographic tones on the paper and we want to burn in an area on the paper. So which grade do we choose to burn in? Now we can use the same grade that we were using. So for instance, the photograph I've just shown you was grade 2 and I could burn in with grade 2. And that's okay, but I can do better than that if I understand this system. If I burned in with grade 0, I would be affecting the highlights of the photograph. So grade 0 starts up here and it has the greatest effect on the highest areas of the photograph, and its effect as you burn in gets less and less and less as it burns in down these zones. As it gets into these dark zones down here, grade 0 has practically no effect at all for regular burning in. So if I use grade 0, I'm going to affect these high zones and I'm going to make them much more subtle. I'm going to make them very soft. They will get a little darker, of course, that's why I'm burning in, but it'll be a very soft darkness that I produce. And generally speaking, if I use grade 0, I'm going to darken the photograph because all the highlights that give us the brightness of the picture will be reduced as I burn in with grade 0. Now, as you can imagine, there's a crossover area where the two grades cross over, and down here I'm burning in with grade 5. Now, most affected when I burn in with grade 5 is the low zones, the darkest areas. They're the most affected by grade 5 burning in. And as we go up the zones, the grade 5 has less and less and less effect on our photograph. So if I want to darken the dark areas but leave the highlights, I would use grade 5, and I could burn in the dark areas and it would give the picture a sort of sparkle, which is nice. We like that because the highlights are not affected too much by the grade 5. So they stay nice and high and bright, but the dark areas get a bit darker. It increases the contrast. If I burn in with grade 0, I'm actually going to reduce the contrast of the photograph because my highlights are going to come down, and so it gets muddier and muddier and muddier as I burn in. Now I'm talking about burning in the sky. So do I want to make the sky muddy, or do I want to give the sky, the clouds, a little bit more crispness, more definition? Well, for me, I want the more definition and not the muddiness. So I go for grade 5. So I hope that explains it for you of why you would choose grade 0 to burn in or grade 5 to burn in. Let's get back to the photograph. Back at the photograph, this is that grade 2 straight print that I did. And this is the sky burned in with grade 5. Now, I've used exactly the same exposure again. So I gave it the 10 seconds at grade 2, and then I gave it 10 seconds at grade 5. So it's had 20 seconds total. And you can see we're getting some nice detail in there. So that's making me happy. I like that. We're starting to balance the photograph now with the sky and the ground. And I like that kind of balance. A plain vanilla sky like that doesn't do it for me. The next thing I want to do is punch up this ground because it needs a bit more zing. It's flat. And so I'm going to increase the grade to grade 3. So my next print should be a total grade 3 print with the sky burned in 10 seconds at grade 5. Remember, grade 5 increases the dark areas but leaves the highlights alone. So let's look at that next print. And here is the sky burned in, and you can see that the darker areas have been enhanced nicely, and it's kept some levity to the cloud. There's some nice lightness to it as well. If I'd used grade 0, it would have muddied that, and we wouldn't have had so much dark. So we wouldn't have had that three-dimensional look. And this is not a great, let's face it, this is not a great cloud. So there's not much 3D look to it, but you can see where I'm going with it. You can see I've darkened that, but kept the levity. Now I also used grade 3 for this print, and it's starting to come alive now. It's starting to look better. It's maybe a little bit too bright, but I like it. It's not bad. It's sharp, and there's more contrast. So the sky is beginning to balance the land, and that's something that in my landscape photographs I like to have, this balance. So the next thing I think is to just see if I can add a little bit more sparkle to this ground area here. Now I'm using 10 seconds at grade 3 for the whole print, and then I'm giving the top area here an extra 10 seconds of grade 5. I'm going to give the whole print 10 seconds at grade 5 instead of just the top. So basically a base exposure of grade 3 and then another exposure of grade 5, just to punch up this ground a little bit. And of course the sky will come in as well with that. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So now I have my next print ready to show you, and this is starting to really come together now. I'm beginning to like this shot. As you can see, the sky's there, nice, and the ground is now starting to get some contrast and some zing to it. So a base exposure of 10 seconds at grade 3, and then another exposure of 10 seconds at grade 5. So we're sort of adding some zing to it, and it's nice. It's looking really nice. I think you'll agree. It's starting to look good. There's that road standing out better now because of the grade 5. It's adding a bit more punch to that, and the sky. So from a pretty drab photograph, it's starting to look reasonably good. Now I think it might be a tad too dark, and so I'm going to just dodge this area a little bit, maybe a quarter to a third of a stop, dodge this to bring it out a touch, and maybe reduce the grade 3 by a couple of seconds. So it'll be 8 seconds grade 3, 10 seconds grade 5, and some dodging here, and I'll dodge with the grade 3. Now why am I reducing the grade 3 to make it a little lighter and not the grade 5? Well, remember what we said about grade 0, and these grades that are near 0, they affect the highlights more than the lower tones. So grade 3, to reduce that slightly, will brighten up the image a little bit. Whereas if I reduce the grade 5, it wouldn't affect the highlights, it only affects the darkest parts. So let's have a look what that looks like. And it's looking nice. I really feel now I've got a good balance to this image. I've got the sky darkened, balancing out the foreground. I've got some detail in the clouds, so it's not just this white sky of nothing. I've got something going on in there, it's alive. I've got the foreground, which is nice and sharp and has got great contrast. And going down, you can see where I dodged this around this area here to lighten this up, to help the eye to follow down the valley to the end of the valley. So I think from a not too good negative, I've pulled something out of it. And the learning, I think, from this video is about grades and burning in and the effect different grades have on the photograph, and why you would choose one over the other when you're burning in. It's a form of split grade printing, but instead of using two separate grades completely, I've given an overall of one grade and then added another. I hope that's interesting for you to see. I'll show you the original now and compare it to it as we run the music out. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you for a tip on Friday.